love due diligence. Out of curiosity, are any of you guys right now going through due diligence? Anybody in? Congrats. What state? Here? Texas? And that led to purchasing parks. So fast forward, I purchased about a dozen parks, sold a few, bought a few more, and then I started sourcing deals to one of the biggest private companies that own parks. And I was doing due diligence for all of those deals. And then I had an epiphany. Well, I get to marry the two things together that I really like doing the best, which is tech, and then I get to geek out on the research and the due diligence process. I'm going to share with you guys the top 5 problems that we're seeing out there. What you really have to do before you visit the property is get a little familiar with it to know what to ask for. So in many cases, a lot of the properties we visit, they have a manhole that may be 5 to 8 foot deep. So you have to be prepared. You better ask your plumber if they've got a PVC sheath to actually feed the video through. So there's a lot of tricks like that. You just have to know what to ask for. You even have to talk to the plumber the right way to get them out, because usually they don't want to do just a video inspection unless it leads to big bills to fix it. This is a big property, over 200 lots, and for some reason there were hazards all over the place. 70% of the tenants had either a Rottweiler or a Pit Bull, which, as you guys probably know, that's not okay with the insurance company. And so that's a situation when you have that high of a percentage. And for some reason, I don't know what they fed the dogs in this county, but they were all twice as big. Bottom left-hand corner, who knows what that is? What kind of a map does that look like? A topographical map. And why that's important is, again, hidden liabilities, flooding. Who cares if it's in a floodplain or not? You have to take it a step further. Often, if you look at the topographical map, you can actually see where areas of water are concentrating by studying those lines. And then you know what tenants to ask if there's an issue, because they'll be happy to tell you. Why? Because there's a lot of gray area, and it's really not spelled out on the contract. So usually on the average purchase agreement, it says buyer and owner agree to a good enough survey, basically. And so where does that put you? Well, most of the time, as a buyer, most of the time the owner is going to say, well, here's a survey. It's good enough to me. Why don't you guys, why don't you accept it? And usually that survey is really old. I've often seen where it's not even a certified legal survey. In other words, it doesn't have the surveyor's stamp on there. And the property has completely changed since that napkin sketch the survey is on. So to protect yourself, something I recommend is, obviously the gold standard is an ALTA survey. And what that is it shows all the utility easements, all the structures, and everything else with detail. So you really want to ask for that, and then just notice when the survey's due by, because 75% of the time, the seller will always miss that survey date, because when you confront them on the fact that that survey's not acceptable and we got to order up a new one, then on average it takes 30 days, 45 days, longer. So just be aware of that. Double check your survey language in the purchase agreement. In the survey, what do you want to ask for? Because most always the title company is not going to send you this detail. I don't know why. But on your survey, you've got exceptions and easements. And so you want to ask them to send you the details on that list of utility easements, because usually they will not. So then when you get that list and the meets and bounds information, you hand that over to the survey company. That's what they need to do a proper ALTA survey. And then you know where all your utility easements are. So I'm not exaggerating here. Probably close to half of the time there's some kind of utility easement just to be aware of. Because again, it's not a problem until it's a problem. So if you close on a deal and on the right upper hand corner there where you see that gas line, that turned out to be a live gas line. You guys get around that or validate how accurate the rent roll really is. So there's a couple ways. Check the bank deposits. That's a good one. Now, number 4, park-owned home rehab cost. I want to ask you guys, what percentage do you think is acceptable for getting into the homes and being able to see what kind of condition they're in? What percentage? All of them? All of them. That's a fantastic answer. Fortunately, it's just not realistic. I rarely see all of them. So my goal, like I said, refer to list of 5 excuses. It's just never realistic. So greater than 90% is the goal. And if we can achieve greater than 90%, that's huge. Number 5, non-standard stuff. Big surprise. Every property is different. Add-ons. The county doesn't like these structures, but you're always the bad guy. So the county won't enforce their local code, but they will put it on you to make sure that all the unapproved structures are approved and permitted or removed. Another tip is always requesting any existing or expired vendor agreements. So this particular one, this space, this area was being leased to a broadband company, right? They went out of business. So the tower, the satellite dishes are left behind. It's a satellite dish. It's huge. That's your problem. So always ask for those agreements. So how do you start the due diligence process? So we always kick it off with the deal breakers. If it's private utilities, then usually we've got over about 600 tasks, usually about 650 around there. If it's all city utilities, we've usually got about 500 plus tasks. And the reason that is obviously there's a lot more things to check off if you've got private utilities. You have to request TCEQ reports, you have to find out who's doing their inspections, and on and on and on. So number 1, we try to fire this off within the first day or 2 of kicking off the process. And we have a questionnaire, about 30 questions, but that changes and gets customized a little bit based on the property that goes to the different county departments. So depending on the size of the county, sometimes I just go to one guy or gal. They wear all the hats, and they're going to answer all the questions. If it's a smaller county, especially, sometimes they're like, I'm not going to answer any of those questions that have to do with zoning, land usability, setbacks, whether it's grandfathered in or not, and they may throw it over to the city attorney. And then the larger counties, the biggest extreme is you've got to go back and forth with different, maybe up to 4 or 5 different departments. Code is a different department, zoning is a different department, planning and development, health department, to cover all of those questions to get it on paper. So protect yourself. Sometimes you've got a smaller county that's also adopting the ordinance from a larger county. So we've got to look at the code, and so we've got our own reference. So we looked it up ourselves, we got the code, and then we matched that against because you'd be surprised. We've worked in some small counties where literally we've had the person tell us that it's in the code planning department. I don't know what the code is. Let me look it up, and I'll get back to you. So you have to look it up on your own. Have your local ordinance for mobile home parks. And I say that not manufactured housing because that's what's called and typically in the code. And then be aware of that. And then third and lastly, you do ask the owner everything that they know about all of those questions. So have you ever had any issues with the county with setbacks? You've got some short lots. And then you can put together, that's the 3-pronged approach. You put those 3 answers together, now you kind of have a bigger picture. Are you guys familiar with looking at different satellite imagery for different seasons? In different seasons, why would you do that? You guys ever pulled up Google Earth aerial view and become extremely frustrating because trees are covering 60% of the homes, right? So it's kind of a workaround. And it often works, is there are 4 or 5 other satellite aerial programs out there. And if you look at it at different times of season, for example, in the winter when all the leaves have died off or fallen, then you can get a much bigger picture of the home inventory. It's called historical aerial. Have any of you guys used that? There you go, my man. That's kind of interesting. You can, instead of relying on the owner's version of what the park's history is, you can look it up yourself. You can go back every year and look at historical aerials. So you can see why, for example, if there's 30 vacant lots and you may find out 5 years ago it was full. This has happened a couple times. Why in the hell are the 30 vacant lots now? And the only way you may get that picture is by looking at the historicals. So what's the normal good average water usage per home? Throw it out. 4,300 gallons. Yes, and what about cost? $53. Yeah, I like that answer. Yeah, $50-$60 for like an average size family. Great answer. And so What overage would be kind of a red flag that you've got more than just water abuse because the water's not being billed back? One particular deal I was working on in Colorado, for example, we pulled the plug before ever engaging because on the third page was a huge article about the landslide that happens there. Again, wasn't in a floodplain, as an example, and the city was requiring the owner to build a huge retention wall, but this is like no small retention wall, bigger park, big retention wall. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Don't hesitate to talk to tenants and ask them, hey, when you move in here, I'm just curious, do you have to put a deposit in? They'll be happy to tell you. And so we found out in a couple of cases there were a lot of deposits, but they weren't being reported, things like that. So definitely get in there with the tenants, validate occupied, anybody home. So what are some different ways you can figure out if the home is occupied? After 5, yeah. See if there's individual trash bins. Do they have individual trash bins? Are there any cars there? Obviously, that's a given. What about utilities? Is there something you can do for utilities to see if anybody's home? See if that's a vacant house or not? What's that? Yep, tag on the utility box. If there's an actual meter there, because if it's active, the city county will come and actually physically put a meter there. What if they recently moved out? So you can also pop open the electric box, see if there's a breaker there, and sometimes, and again, that tells the whole story. If there's cobwebs there, there's no breaker in the breaker box, that tells you no one's been there for a while, yet on the rent roll, for some reason, it says they're paying rent. And some scenarios, it's rare, but in some scenarios, you've got a guy that doesn't care as a vacant home. He's paying on the vacant home, but usually that doesn't last forever. So you don't really want those surprises when you take over to find out you've got some vacant homes and they're going to basically stop paying when you take over. What's the best collaborator, where you share information with your team to use for a due diligence process? Do you guys use any? Yes? Which ones? Which one? You use Dropbox? Okay. Okay, cool. So that's kind of a trick question. My personal favorite collaborator is Asana, where you share tasks with your team. But with a lot of trial and error and doing this for years, I feel like the best one is shared Google Sheets. We use that to share hundreds of tasks with everyone on the team. And the reason that works so effectively is obviously you don't have to email anything back and forth, but Google Sheets is the only thing out there that's more linear. Software collaborators are not really designed for this type of linear work. They're designed more for many different pieces, each with their own tasks of a project. And so I highly recommend Google Sheets. At the bottom here, you can see how we have it laid out. We've got about 30 tabs there for all the different parts of due diligence. Community contacts, property contract, property taxes, zoning, infrastructure, even a marketing tab. And then link all of that to Dropbox. And then you should have 2 Dropboxes, one with stuff from the seller, anything they've provided, and your own, which is going to be your own versions of everything you've been looking up. Another trick question here. When you guys do your own due diligence, and you go back and you take a video of the property and you go back and you look at it, what's the best way to do that video that you're going to go back on so many times and double check things that you can't forget, that you can't remember? How do you guys do a video usually? What's the best way? Is it with your phone or a GoPro? Well, I highly recommend, I can tell some of you guys, you're hesitant to answer this one. The recommendation is use your phone with your window rolled down with your own commentary. That is the best way. So you're going to drive or have somebody drive for you. If you get in an accident, don't blame it on me. So you're driving and you're holding up your phone while somebody's driving. And you're talking about each lot, calling out the number, because that's the only way, you can't make out the number in the video later. So the best way to do a due diligence video is to call out every number and then describe everything that's going on with the home 360 degrees. So why would you drone? And I'm pretty sure this is going to be the only presentation you go to that has a drone in it. Okay, now I've got your attention. Okay. So, first off, you can get awesome aerial pictures, whereas it's a little hard if you're holding up your phone to do a narration of every single home. You can't see behind the home, and that would take a long time. So with the drone, you definitely get awesome footage behind the home. On the bottom right-hand corner there, that's kind of cool because we can draw a flight plan before we ever go to the property, and then we say go, and the drone automatically flies the property, the whole property. Why would we do that? Because here's a topographical map that it will create along with the structures in 3D. Some of the stuff you should retain and some you can't. So when should you retain a park's Google listing versus just closing it down, maybe has a couple bad reviews on there, and just starting over? So there's a magic number there. Usually it's more than 3-4 reviews. And then there's ways to transfer those things to you. So it could be a website. Usually there's no reason to transfer a website. But in some cases, you want to retain its top 3 position if it's there. And the only way to do that is to transfer Google listing and a couple of other things to your name. And you can certainly do that through the Google Business Management panels. So lastly, thank you. I hope I left enough time for questions. And if there are any questions, please feel free to ask. Yes?